Discuss these disheartening crime figures now with Lisa Vetten. She's a gender violence specialist from the University of Johannesburg. So, Lisa, we have spoken so often about these appalling stats. This is particularly shocking, 9,500 in just 3 months. And, of course, these are only the reported cases. We know so many cases just don't get reported. Do you think we're ever going to turn this around?
Well, it's important to look at the statistics both in the short term to see where things are spiking, but it's also important to put them into a slightly longer term context. So if we compare the same 6-month period for 2019-20, rather than the COVID period, which was artificial, then actually in the first 6 months of this year, of this financial year, compared to 2019-20's financial year, we've actually reported 2,500 rapes less. So there's been an increase in the short term, but if we look over the longer term, it seems to be suggesting there is a bit of a downward trend going on. But again, you don't know whether the lingering effects of the lockdown and the prohibitions on movement are also artificially suppressing the number of rapes.
Yeah, and the other thing, of course, is that we know that to report a rape and to go through the process of bringing the matter to court can be very traumatizing. And women who have been raped, men who have been raped, are not always treated as they should be with the sort of kindness and respect that they deserve. So you're saying that if we look slightly longer term, we're seeing less rapes. Do you think that that is a sign that people have stopped reporting, or that some policies are paying off? And if so, which are the interventions that are working?
That is such a good question, Sally, because I think, between 2019-20 and now, we've had the problem with the DNA laboratories around the backlog. That may have acted to discourage. We've also had some very highly publicized cases which were not very well dealt with, that may also have discouraged victims from coming forward. We also have the lovely situation of ANC and eNCA appointing a convicted rapist as the mayor of Cunnaland. That is not wonderful either. So, those sorts of situations can make you wonder, why did I bother reporting? Are there consequences for those who do these kinds of things? So I think we make some progress, but we often undercut the progress by doing other very foolish things. So until we get a good national prevalence survey that tries to ask who has experienced rape over the course of their lifetimes and who reported, we can't answer that question. The last such survey was done in 1997, which is 24 years ago. You'd think it would be a priority to try and find out.
I mean, we're known as the rape capital of the world, and we haven't done a prevalence survey since 1997. That is absolutely appalling. Lisa, I wanted to know if you've got a sense of how much of this do we lay at the door of policing, where we know that they are understaffed, underpaid, and we don't have enough of them? And how much do you think is society's general attitude, the way some men believe they can treat women, and some of the mixed messages that you've just referred to?
I think we need to start thinking about this in much more complex ways. Because if you look at the previous 3-month period that was reported on, and this most recent 3-month period, you can see there are definite shifts in the areas which are reporting greater number and lesser numbers of rapes. We don't do the kind of fine-grained analysis to go and say, well, what's happening here, that their figures have shot up when 3 months ago they were much lower. We don't do that. We don't use statistics as a good source of information. We tend to use them in quite limited ways, really just to say, did you get raped in the home of someone you know, or was it outside? That doesn't really tell us much or sufficient about the dynamics of rape in order to be able to intervene. So that's problem number one. We don't use statistics properly. Number two, there is a problem with policing. About 50% of rapes never result in arrest. And most of those which never result in arrest are stranger rapes. That's a concern because a number of our stranger rapes will be serial rapists. So if we're not detecting them, it means they're merely going to continue raping. And that's a kind of rape that is possible to prevent if we can identify serial rapists rapidly, do the necessary good detective work and have them arrested. And then, of course, there's also the prosecution services, how well they do. And then, of course, there are also the questions of, there is a certain amount of rape that happens in workplaces that doesn't get reported to the police but is dealt with through the labour tribunals. We don't know enough about how well the CCMA, the bargaining councils and the labour court are doing in relation to those kinds of rapes. And then there's what you talked about, is the kinds of education that we need to be doing around consent.
Yeah.
How to have, what does it mean to have sexual ethics? What does it mean to behave in an ethical way in sexual encounters? And so there's a lot we need to do. We do a little bit patchily, but we don't sustain it.
Yeah. Lisa, it was interesting, the police minister mentioned, I think he said around 1,000 rapes. There was drugs or alcohol use. I'm presuming that is, drugging someone and then taking advantage of them. Is that useful information? You say we're not using the information properly, not getting the right sort of information. Is that perhaps a growing trend, something that we should be more cautious about?
It is the kind of thing that you do want to look at. I mean, a certain number of drug-facilitated rapes often don't get reported because those drugs pass out of the blood system very quickly. So by the time you have started wondering what has happened to you, if you have no recollection and have gone to report, it may be too late. So I think there may be a need for us to look at how well the toxicology laboratories are doing in picking up drugs and alcohol. That's something to look at. Yes, because the use of drugs and alcohol is important to monitor. The other thing is, Becky Taylor spoke about an increase in the number of kidnappings. A certain number of rapes also occur within the context of kidnappings. So it would be useful if we started getting that kind of linkage. The same with armed robbery and housebreakings. Some rapes occur within those contexts as well. So it's important to start creating these linkages of what are the contexts in which rapes are occurring? What are the steps that we can take? How does very degraded urban environments that offer so much opportunity for rape, what role are they playing? What is the role of the local municipalities in addressing and making environments safer? So those are the sorts of questions we should be asking when we look at crime statistics and start to look for patterns that might tell us where to intervene.
Thank you so much for those insights, Lisa Vetten, gender violence specialist from the University of Johannesburg.